Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I'm the food enthusiast here at J More Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live, drop your questions into the comment box and you'll see me turn my head from time to check and see if you have any questions for our guests. This week's guests are the dynamic duo of John and Sukey Jamison of Jamison Farms, a 210-acre farm in western Pennsylvania. In 1985, they started selling lamb mail order to home cooks. Late in the 1980s, the tables turned by selling to premier chefs and restaurants across the country. Authors of the book Coyotes in the Pasture and Wolves at the Door, Stories and Recipes from Our Farm to Your Table. Let's welcome Sukey and John Jamison.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
So my first question usually is, what's on your plate today?
What's on our plate today?
What's on our plate today?
Food-wise? Is that a food question or?
It's an open question. I'm trying to be clever in saying what's on your plate today. So other than doing the show, what else are you doing today?
Well, we had we were supposed to work on a video that we're doing here at the farm with someone, but they got a camera person that had a drone, and we were all set to go back in the hills and walk around. And then because of the fires in Canada, we have it was a lot of overcast, so we couldn't do it. And then tonight at 6 o'clock, we were supposed to have a meeting here at the farm with a bunch of men from our church, and it got canceled because of the air quality also. So anyway, that was what we were going to do, and now it's much more fun to just talk to you.
You're right. I should be the highlight of your day.
You are. But we had all this other stuff, and it all ended up on one day, and it was funny.
Well, I'm going to hit the book first because my curiosity is the title, Coyotes in the Pasture and Wolves at the Door. And we'll go like this so people can see it.
That's it.
Which is a blend of your stories of how your farm started and how you grew your business and recipes. Why this title?
The title, we had the title long before we had the book. We had some stories, but the title refers to the fact that if you're starting it almost applies to any business. Ours was specifically coyotes in the pasture, the problems that we had operationally in the field. And then the wolves at the door refers to the banks that wouldn't lend us money and the customers that wouldn't pay their bills and what happened afterwards. So that's what it was.
So it was literal. I figure with animals you could have, who knows, bears, at least Western Pennsylvania. We don't know.
We did have coyotes.
We did have coyotes in the pasture, and that's the physical part. We did have those.
Okay. I have so many notes down here. Let's start back at the beginning. You met at college.
Yes.
Both were English majors. Is that how you met, at college or?
No, before college. His roommate was my roommate's boyfriend, so we went on a blind date. And that's how we met. And then we were seniors in high school at that point.
Oh, okay. So this is really a long-term relationship.
Yeah, we have 54 years together this year. So,
as they say in my hood, mazel tov.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so English majors. And I saw in the book, Sukey, that you took a year off from college to work so he could finish up college.
Right. Yeah. When we were getting married and things like that, he finished college and then I finished college. And so we were English majors because we figured then we could read and write. And so it doesn't really have anything to do with farming. We fell into farming. We always say we came to farming through food because we love food and we love cooking. So.
All right. So let's talk about that fall into food.
Yeah.
What I was reading, John, your mother couldn't cook. Sukey, your mother took cooking classes, even with Julia Child. Am I remembering correct?
Yeah.
All right. So food was the center of the universe. John was a salesman. You were somewhere out in the Midwest. How did you end up on the farm? Why did you decide that lambs would be the animals that you raised?
When we came back to Western Pennsylvania, he went into the coal business, COAL, coal, and we decided we wanted to get an old house to restore. So we found an old house, 1798 stone house. It was beautiful, but in various states of disrepair. But it had 65 acres with it, and they wouldn't sell it without us taking the 65 acres. So we did take it. And then we decided we didn't know what we were going to do with 65 acres. And so one thing led to another. I was doing some catering. So that was developing my food love. And then we had 3 children. I said, we should get some sheep, and we'll do sheep for our 4-H projects. And that's really how I learned about sheep and sheep husbandry and taking care of them, this, that, and the other thing. And we had 14
with everybody.
Yeah, 13 ewes, which are mother sheep, and 1 ram. And we had lambs the next year. 5 months later, that's the gestation period. And it was all a learning process. The whole thing was a learning process for me as well as for my children. And then we had the lamb butchered, and we decided we would use, the meat was very, very good, and we loved it. And one thing led to another. I used some for my catering, and one thing led to another and to another to another. And that's really how it grew.
Well, I should stress that at the time, these were pasture-fed lambs. It wasn't any type of meal, cornmeal, or whatever might be fed. And that was really ahead of its time.
Yes, it was.
You were at the revolution, or going back to what farming used to be was farm to table, and you started a mail order business with your lamb.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how you transitioned into a restaurant, I find very interesting, or selling to restaurants, because the last show I did, I had Amy Zittelman on a Zoom tahini. And a monumental moment for her is when she sold her tahini. She was in Philadelphia, to Michael Solinov of Sahav.
Yes, yeah.
And that opened the door to her.
Right.
You sold to Michelin's 2-star chef, Jean-Louis Paladon.
Right.
Right.
And yeah.
That's what opened the door.
That's what started it. It was that's what happens often, I think, with businesses like ours, and with the lady about whom you're speaking, with Michael, is you find some chef finds you, and then if they like you, then they. Jean-Louis cried. He was so happy to find it. It was great. And he was a character, beside, as you mentioned, being the only 2-star Michelin chef in the country at the time. And so he was a big guy. And really, when you think about the whole farm to table thing, he was the first one to really do this on the East Coast, and Alice Waters was doing it on the West Coast at about the same time. So it was at that time, that was 88. Actually, when we went to Jean-Louis, was Memorial Day 1988, so 35 years ago. And it was great. And that was really the span of the business, basically.
Yeah, I saw something posted on one of your pages. I keep up with everybody's social media.
Right.
Is there a new movie out with about John Louis Paladin, or has it?
We've been working on a documentary, and we have pieces of it. His daughter Verven was interested in doing something because she was 15 or 16 when he died, and she has kids now, and she wanted the kids to know who her father was. And so that was the start of it. And we've gotten, we did an event at the French ambassador's residence about a year ago to raise funds, but it was hard to do everything with the COVID thing. But we're getting out of that, and we have a dinner we're doing in the fall at the Watergate. But a lot of his friends, Danielle's involved, in Ariane Dagan, and Lee Jones from Chef's Garden, and a lot of people that were friends of his, followers almost. He was a character.
Right. And I think, Sukey, you had to cook for him. He came out to the farm.
I did. He did come to the farm, and I did have to cook for him. And then I also spent time in his kitchen when he was helping me develop one of my recipes that I did for making one of the products that I made. So it was a great influence.
I'm just looking over my notes here. So what is the difference between Australian lamb and the lamb that we have in America?
Well, that's a broad question. So Australian lamb generally is raised on grass also. The lamb in this country primarily is raised, is born in the West, and then it is finished in feedlots in the Midwest with a lot of corn. But a lot of people are using more pasture now than they did before, but not to the degree that we did. And what made ours different, because it's American lamb, but it's different because it was our lamb, is the grass that we have here is so good in southwestern Pennsylvania. In 1900, the biggest merino flocks in the country were in about a 5 or 6 county area of southwestern Pennsylvania, because the grass is just incredible. We have about 50 inches of rain a year normally, and it always happens about the right time. And as I always say, in April and May, one of our big things that we do on the farm, I mean, we don't live in a city, so we don't go to hockey games and stuff. We sit on the porch, drink beer, and watch the grass grow.
There are actually people who do that.
Oh yeah, there are. And it's fun. You should try it sometime. But in April, May, you can see it. It's almost like asparagus. We have a lot of asparagus. And we've had a great year with asparagus. But anyway, it'll grow. I mean, you can go in the morning and it'll be like that, and then it's like that at the end of the day. And the grass is just amazing here. And that's really why Jean-Louis' favorite lamb in France was one called Sisteron, and the elevation of Sisteron in the lower Alps is about the same as ours. And he and I always thought that was why I liked it so much.
Right. And I think you had described in the book or somewhere, because I try to do my due diligence and become slightly educated, just a little bit, or abyssal, as they would say, that the spring grass had onion flavors to it.
Yeah.
Late summer was more carrots.
Yes.
And winter was the succulent grasses. So the lamb would take on these different flavors within the meat.
Yes, that's right. And it does. We're just starting to get Queen Anne's lace now, and that'll sweeten it up.
And in the book, Sukey, there was a point when you were deciding which lambs to take to John Louis, that you had the keener eye of picking out the best lambs.
Yes.
To go to the abattoir.
Yes.
So what were you looking at these for these lambs that say, oh, they were better? You were touching them.
I was touching their backs. You could feel how you could feel the muscling and everything else across the back, and if they were in good shape, and you don't have bones sticking out, so that they filled out in a nice way.
Okay. What has been, well, I should tell people that you've retired from lamb farming. You still have the farm, and you are still doing catering, I noticed on your website, which is jamisonfarms.com, people, that you're doing events at the farm, fundraisers, things of that nature. What else are you keeping? You have the film that you're working on. There's no more lambs, or do you keep a couple lambs? What's going on there?
Well, the truth of it is, he became ill last fall, and now he's all better. But while he was very sick, I got rid of all the sheep
because she couldn't take care of them in the winter. It'd be too hard.
I felt it was difficult to care for him as well as care for the sheep. So, and we're at that age. So we thought about getting sheep again. And then we thought, well, you know what, if we want to go travel, or if we want to step back or do whatever we want to do, our time is our own now. So that's why we decided.
Yeah.
And we have plenty to do here on the farm as far as maintenance and upkeep.
And we're writing a lot about it. And I'm going, this thing I was going to do this morning is about the soil. And what we've done is, because we've done intensive rotational grazing for 35 years, truly regenerative agriculture, which that's a word that's being thrown around a lot. We've been doing it for a long time because, we started doing it in 78 and we bought this farm in 85. We've been rotating. And so we've sequestered a lot of carbon into the soil, really improved it. And we won various conservation awards because of it. We've never sprayed anything, and except for frost seeding, which just means you throw seeds on the ground in early spring and they work their ways in. But and that's what we do, is just promote it.
There are so many funny stories in here, and one about hunting on your property. So people, you have to read some of these stories. It's easy reading, entertaining, and the recipes are fabulous. Now, what do most people do wrong when cooking lamb?
What do they do?
Over seasoning or over cooking.
Both.
And especially with young lamb, which is what ours really was, because most lamb, when it's in a feedlot, they're much larger and have more fat on them. But as far as the young lamb, salt and pepper and olive oil were my go-tos for the rack or the saddle or the loin chop or anything. I didn't need a big array of spices. Cooking, the other cuts, braising, the slow roasting. There's nothing more delicious than the slow roasted shoulder falling off the bone.
What was it? Leg of lamb to cook for 6 hours?
7-hour leg of lamb. Absolutely.
And that was out of Patricia Wells'.
Yeah, Patricia.
Book. But it's used a lot. That's a big in her bistro book.
It's a bistro recipe, and it's totally different and changes the texture of the meat from doing the roast leg of lamb. But it's so delicious. And of course, the yield is much higher from a leg than it is from a shoulder.
Right.
You don't have any of the waste and everything else.
Is there any other companies that you would recommend for people to get the lamb now that you're not in the business? Is there a place or a company that you might recommend?
I haven't really investigated it, and nobody's ever come to us to say, I'm selling my lamb, so we really don't know that.
Okay.
So I can't.
It's just curious. We're going to wet somebody's whistle here. They're going to think leg of lamb and whatever, and now they want to go out and get it.
Write to me and say, where can I go? And I said, I really don't know, because our one thing that we had more than any other farmer was we had our slaughterhouse.
So we controlled it all the way
through. So we controlled it all. I always say we went right from the farm to the dinner plate, because it was cut how we wanted it, and we did it ourselves. So it was how I would cook it. And the reason we did that was so that we would have access to the meat cut the way I wanted it cut, not the way the butcher wanted it cut. So
I think I would. Nobody was doing it like we were, and we feel strongly that way because we know what we had to do. But I think D'Artagnan probably, even though it's changed ownership, probably because there's so much. She had domestic, she had Australian, she had New Zealand. So that's kind of where I would look first.
Yeah. We were talking, I just came back from the fancy food show in New York. So somebody was cooking venison with torchon, foie gras torchon. Well, how could I pass up tasting that?
You can't.
And the venison was like butter and the foie gras. And I saw in front she had the torchon wrapped, and it said D'Artagnan. And I said, well, where does the venison come from? I said, is that D'Artagnan? I'm not getting an answer from her. And then the salesman comes over, and I said, is the venison D'Artagnan? Because I'm in a thing that doesn't say D'Artagnan. And I didn't realize that she had sold, or if I didn't remember that she had sold the company.
Yeah.
But it took a while for them to say, oh, we now have D'Artagnan. But it was the same salesman that had been working for D'Artagnan.
Oh, really?
I think her product was fabulous. And you had a good relationship with Julia Child as well.
Yes, we did. She was very important to us. And I have a couple good Julia stories in the book, which hopefully you've read. But she was very opinionated, and I put a letter in the book that she wrote me after we sent her a stew that we were developing, and
that was the one I did
with Jean-Louis, and we changed the recipe from home to commercial and just multiplied the herbs, and which was a disaster. And she said she wrote a letter, and very nice, and said that there's perhaps too much she said the herb flavor is pervasive, which I thought was great. How many people would say that it's pervasive? But she did. And then she said, is it perhaps rosemary? It was great.
Yeah. Everybody has those herbs that I'm fine with rosemary. I don't use it that much. I can't stand sage.
Yeah, I understand.
And I was at a restaurant, and I think I got a pork chop, and I could smell it coming towards me, and I knew I couldn't eat it. It was that.
Yeah. It can be overwhelming.
Well, I think, when you ask Sukey about how people mess up lamb, I guess is Jean-Louis always said to me, he said, my job with your lamb is to not F it up. And that was what he didn't want to touch it. He was all about the product and the flavor of the product.
Right.
And
I think somewhere in the book it says something. He says the three most important things when you're cooking is flavor, flavor, and flavor.
That's correct.
I might be misquoting. I'm not quite sure.
No, I think you're right. I think I've heard that.
Okay. And I have to say, when I did the promotional pieces, I have fun. I do the little stories on Instagram and Facebook.
That's great.
And when I do the stories, I pick out music. And I hadn't finished reading your book. So I pumped in for music, Silence of the Lamb, but it was such a horrendous music. It was, I went, this is not pleasant to put with this. Only to find out that your lambs were involved in the movie.
Yes, they were. Yeah. So the scene of where Hannibal draws the sketch of Clarice holding the lamb when she goes to see him, that was when he's in the cage.
He's in the cage.
That was our lamb that they used for that.
It was funny. I just went, this is not a pleasant note, but that's what came to mind to do something of interest with it.
That's great.
And your daughter, at least in the book, got involved in the business. Is she still working in hospitality?
Yes. She and the other thing about Julia, since you mentioned Julia, Julia would always wonder where she is. She'd write a note to us, and she was just great that way. But anyway, she works for
Flower
Child, which is a fast casual. There's one in Bethesda. And she worked there for a while, and they've moved her around because she was at CIA around 2000, 2001. And then she worked for a lot of top chefs in New York. She worked for Eric Repair for probably 3 years. And
she worked for Danielle.
And she worked for Danielle,
years, so
in Palm Beach, at the restaurant in Palm Beach.
Well, I know that there was this, I'm not going to go in great detail, but a date that you had to go into New York, and she was going to start her stagiaire with Daniel, and you postponed the date to September 18th, but you were supposed to be there September 11th.
Yes, we were.
On that unfortunate day. But people have to get the book to read all the stories and get all the recipes. And it's probably available on Amazon.com, and it's available. Do check out their website, JamisonFarm.com. And I have a couple questions I ask at the end of the show. So whoever wants to jump in on that, what was your best bite this week?
You?
Mine was my asparagus. I'm just so happy with it this year. It's been coming for almost 2 months, which is unbelievable, the season. So yes, asparagus.
That was hers. I was saying about that. Mine was, we had a dinner for people on Saturday, and I was talking about grass-fed lamb, and they didn't understand. So I just grabbed a piece of loin out of the line. It was buffet, tasted it, and said, now taste this. And they tasted it, and they could taste the grass. They understood. So that was a learning moment. And of course it was delicious. I haven't had it for a long time.
If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Study more.
That's interesting. I like that. Study more. I think take more, have more self-confidence.
Okay.
Maybe I was going to say take more risks. But that's misleading. Just have more confidence with your follow your thoughts.
Your instincts.
necessarily your dreams, but believe in.
Pursue your dreams.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Especially at a young age.
Yes.
Right.
We encouraged our son, who, speaking of that, who wanted to graduate and go into acting. So we encouraged him to go to New York to try to be an actor, to find out if indeed he really wanted to be an actor. And he was there for 3 years and decided that no, he was going to go to law school and Wharton, and now he's a businessman.
He's a .com zillionaire and won't even talk to me. But yeah, life changes.
Life changes. I didn't want him to look back at his life at age 35 and said, I should have been an actor. So
yeah,
should have, could have. Yeah. If you could wake up tomorrow morning with a new talent, what would the new talent be?
You're first.
Dancing.
Dancing? Good for you.
Yeah, my beat is way off. He teases me all the time.
Yeah. Me, it would be speaking French. And if that's not a talent, then it'd be tap dancing.
That's good. That's good. And your ultimate culinary fail? Well, we sort of talked about the one that went to Julia, but maybe there's another one you'd like to share.
Yeah, well, the one that went to Julia, we fixed and she helped us fix, and that was fine. But the worst was, you tell them.
Early on, this was in my in our early days before maybe we had sheep, but we were doing catering, and we went to an event and we were preparing omelets, and it was outside, and there was. I
make omelets well, and that's what we were doing.
That's what we were doing for the it was a brunch, and it was outside, and the wind and the weather was just terrible, and he couldn't get the fire to go. So eventually we moved everything
inside, but it was a large.
The whole flow was.
It was at a very fancy hunt club, horses, and people with a lot of money and little patience. And I couldn't make the omelet. I couldn't get the omelet
fast enough because the heat.
And there were 100 people there trying to get omelet. So anyway, we moved it inside and tried not to just totally crash. And we kept going and we worked it out, but it was a disaster. It was just awful. So no, that wasn't good.
Okay. Well, John, so glad to see you.
Thank you.
Back and feeling fit.
Yes.
Sukey, I guess the next time I'm at ICP, it won't be WCR, whatever it is. I hope our paths meet in person. And so glad you've earned the right to step back, remind the people, Jamison Farm. And the book, Coyotes in the Pasture and Wolves at the Door.
Thank you very much.
Worth a read, definitely. And you have the great recipes by Sukey.
Yeah.
All the best. Thank you for joining us. And I'm just going to go over a couple notes with my audience. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to get to know you.
It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. The Food Enthusiast is taking a break next week and returning Thursday, July 13th, when my guest will be Chef Derek Purcell, Culinary Director of the Franciscan Center of Baltimore and board member of the Restaurant Association of Maryland and a board member of the American Culinary Federation Greater Baltimore chapter. Before I forget, have a safe 4th of July. And also, monthly, J Moore Living is giving away $50 gift cards to some of your favorite local restaurants. Visit jmooreliving.com/contest to enter. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at my email address, which is food@jmooreliving.com, or Instagram @Dara Cooks. All shows are immediately archived in video form on J Moore's Facebook page and jmooreliving.com. Feel free to dig into our video archives of past shows. We truly appreciate it when you share our show with friends and family. And as I like to end my show, May your plates always remain full. Thanks for joining us. Have a safe 4th, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.